The planet Vethkara was beautiful in ways that made Elena Vasquez forget how dangerous it truly was, as she had been warned many times about wandering too far from the safety of Outpost Meridian. But the xenobiologist could not help herself when it came to discovery. She walked through the alien forest with her sample kit in one hand and her scanner in the other, her boots crunching softly on the strange purple moss that covered the ground like a thick carpet. The trees here were not like Earth trees at all, as they twisted upward in spirals, and their bark glowed with soft blue light when the wind touched them. Elena had studied many alien worlds in her career, but Vethkara was special in a way she could not fully explain. The Galactic Confederacy had established this joint research outpost only 6 months ago, and the agreement with the native Valorians had been difficult to achieve. The Valorians were a proud species, standing nearly 7 feet tall, with powerful bodies covered in shimmering fur that changed color with their moods. They looked like wolves that had learned to walk upright and build cities, and their culture was built around strength and dominance. They had allowed humans on their world only because the Confederacy had pushed for it, but they made no secret of their low opinion of the small, soft creatures from Earth. Elena had heard the whispers and seen the looks of contempt from the Valorian guards at the outpost. They called humans the naked ones and laughed at how easily human skin could be cut. They did not understand why the Confederacy considered humans worthy of galactic citizenship, and Elena sometimes wondered if they were waiting for an excuse to end the partnership. But none of that mattered to her right now, because she had found something wonderful. Near a small stream that bubbled with water the color of liquid silver, Elena discovered a patch of bioluminescent fungi that pulsed with green and gold light. She knelt down to collect samples, her heart racing with excitement as she carefully placed specimens into her collection tubes. This was why she had become a scientist, for these moments of pure wonder when the universe revealed its secrets. She was so focused on her work that she did not hear the rustling in the bushes behind her. The attack came fast and brutal. Something slammed into her back and knocked her forward, and she felt sharp claws tear through her jacket and into the flesh of her arm. Elena cried out in pain and rolled to the side, her blood spattering across the purple moss in bright red drops. Her hand went automatically to the sidearm at her hip as she scrambled backward. Her attacker was small. Elena blinked in surprise as she saw a Valorian cub crouching in front of her, barely 3 feet tall and covered in silver fur that bristled with fear. The cub's eyes were wide and wild, and its small body trembled as it snarled at her with teeth that were already sharp enough to kill. But Elena noticed something else too, something that made her pause despite the pain in her bleeding arm. The cub's back leg was twisted at a bad angle, caught in the gnarled roots of a fallen tree. The little creature was trapped and terrified, and it had attacked because it thought Elena was going to hurt it. Elena's emergency beacon had activated the moment her blood hit the air, and she knew that help would come soon. Protocol was clear about what she should do, as she was supposed to retreat to a safe distance and wait for armed support. The Valorians were dangerous even as children, and no one would blame her for protecting herself. Her hand rested on her weapon. The cub lunged again, dragging itself forward despite its trapped leg, and its claws caught Elena's hand and opened a new wound. Blood flowed freely now, dripping from her fingers onto the ground, and the pain was sharp and hot. The cub was going to keep attacking until Elena either left or defended herself, and defending herself meant using her weapon. She looked into those silver eyes and saw the terror there. This was not a monster. This was a child, lost and hurt and frightened, and it was doing the only thing it knew how to do. The cub did not understand that Elena was not a threat, because no one had ever taught it that some creatures in the universe chose not to hurt others. The Valorians valued strength above all else, and this little one had learned that lesson well. Elena made her choice. She took her hand off her weapon and held both hands up in front of her, palms out, showing that she meant no harm. The cub snapped at her again, but Elena did not flinch. She began to speak in a soft, low voice, the same tone she had once used to calm frightened wolves during her research on Earth. "It is okay, little one," she said gently, her voice barely above a whisper. "I am not going to hurt you. I know you are scared, but I am here to help." The cub growled, but there was confusion in its eyes now. It had never seen a creature respond to attack with such strange behavior. Where was the fight? Where was the violence that should follow blood? Elena moved slowly, so slowly that it felt like time itself had slowed down. She kept her voice calm and steady as she inched closer to the trapped cub, ignoring the blood that ran down her arm and dripped from her torn hand. Every instinct told her to run, to protect herself, to treat this alien child as the danger it clearly was. But Elena had never been very good at listening to those instincts. She reached the twisted roots and began to examine the cub's trapped leg, her trained eyes quickly seeing the problem. The bone was fractured, and the roots had wrapped around the limb in a way that made simple escape impossible. The cub must have been here for hours, maybe longer, growing more frightened and desperate with each passing moment. "This is going to hurt a little," Elena warned, even though she knew the cub could not understand her words. "But I need to get you free, okay? I need you to trust me." The cub snapped at her face, missing by inches. Elena did not stop. She worked carefully, using her good hand to manipulate the roots while keeping her injured arm pressed against her body. The cub scratched her twice more, adding new wounds to her collection. But Elena simply gritted her teeth and kept working. Blood loss was making her dizzy now, and she knew she needed medical attention soon. But she could not leave this child alone, in the dark. Finally, after what felt like forever, the roots gave way, and the cub's leg came free. The little creature tried to run, but its broken leg collapsed under it, and it fell to the ground with a cry of pain that sounded almost human. Elena's heart broke at the sound, and she immediately opened her emergency kit and began to treat the wound. She fashioned a splint from synthetic materials and wrapped the fracture with gentle care, speaking softly the whole time about nothing and everything. She told the cub about Earth, about her childhood, about the first time she saw the stars, and knew she wanted to explore them. The words did not matter, only the tone, only the steady comfort of another voice in the darkness. When she finished, the cub looked up at her with those silver eyes, and something had changed in them. The fear was still there, but so was something else, something that looked almost like wonder. Elena smiled despite her pain, and began to hum an old lullaby her grandmother had sung to her many years ago. The cub, exhausted from fear and struggle, slowly relaxed against her side and closed its eyes. That was how the Valorian hunting party found them. The hunting party emerged from the forest like ghosts made of muscle and fury, their massive bodies moving with a silence that seemed impossible for creatures so large. There were 6 of them, each standing over 7 feet tall, their fur shifting from deep blue to angry red as they took in the scene before them. Elena looked up from where she sat, the sleeping cub still pressed against her side, and she knew immediately that she was in terrible trouble. The lead hunter was a male with scars across his muzzle and eyes that burned with barely controlled rage. He let out a roar that shook the trees and sent birds scattering into the sky, and he pointed one clawed finger at Elena as he spoke in a voice like thunder. "Human, you have touched a cub of the Vethkara. You have broken our most sacred law." Elena tried to stand, but her legs were weak from blood loss, and she stumbled. Two of the hunters rushed forward and grabbed her arms, their claws digging into her flesh as they dragged her away from the sleeping child. The cub woke with a startled cry and tried to follow, but another hunter scooped it up and held it close. "Please," Elena said, her voice shaking but clear. "The cub was hurt. I was only trying to help." The lead hunter stepped close to her face, so close that she could feel his hot breath on her skin. His lips pulled back to reveal teeth that could tear her apart in seconds, and when he spoke again, his voice was low and dangerous. "Help? You think we need help from your kind? You are prey, human. You are weak and soft, and you have no right to touch our children." He turned to his companions and snarled an order in the Valorian tongue. "Take her to the outpost. The matriarch will decide her fate." The journey back to Outpost Meridian was a blur of pain and fear. The hunters moved quickly through the forest, and Elena had to run to keep up with their long strides. Her wounds ached and bled, and more than once she stumbled and fell, only to be yanked back to her feet by rough hands. The hunters did not speak to her or look at her, treating her like cargo rather than a person. When they finally reached the outpost, a crowd had already gathered. Elena saw her fellow humans watching with worried faces, and she saw the Valorian guards standing with their arms crossed and their expressions cold. News had traveled fast, and everyone knew that something terrible had happened. The hunters threw Elena to the ground in front of the main building, and she landed hard on her injured arm. Pain exploded through her body, and she had to bite her lip to keep from crying out. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. Commander David Chen pushed through the crowd and rushed to her side, his face pale with concern. "Elena, what happened? Are you all right?" She lied, though they both knew it was not true. "There was a cub, David. She was hurt and trapped, and I helped her. That is all I did." The lead hunter stepped forward and pointed at Elena, with accusation burning in his eyes. "She touched a cub of the Alpha's bloodline. She put her hands on the daughter of High Matriarch Cyrith herself. By our law, the punishment is death." A ripple of shock went through the human observers, and Commander Chen's face went hard. "Now wait just a moment," he said, stepping between Elena and the hunters. "Dr. Vasquez was attacked. Look at her wounds. She defended herself against a threat, which is her right under both human law and Confederacy treaty." The hunter laughed, a harsh and ugly sound. "She did not defend herself, Commander. If she had, the cub would be dead. No, your doctor chose to touch what is forbidden, to put her alien hands on a child of the ruling bloodline. There is no defense for such an act." Elena struggled to her feet, using Chen's arm for support. "The cub was afraid," she said, forcing her voice to stay calm. "She attacked me because she was trapped and injured, and did not know what else to do. I could not leave her there to suffer. I could not just walk away." "Then you should have called us," the hunter snarled. "You should have let her own kind handle the situation. Instead, you acted like you had the right to intervene, like you were one of us. You are not one of us, human. You never will be." Two more hunters stepped forward and took Elena's arms, pulling her away from Commander Chen. The commander tried to follow, but the lead hunter blocked his path. "She will be taken to a holding cell until the matriarch arrives to pass judgment. Any attempt to interfere will be seen as an act of war against the Valorian people. Do you understand?" Chen's hands clenched into fists at his sides, but he nodded slowly. "I understand. But I want it on record that Dr. Vasquez acted with compassion and good intent. Whatever your laws say, she is not a criminal." The hunter said nothing, only gestured for his companions to take Elena away. The holding cell was small and cold, with walls made of some kind of stone that seemed to absorb all warmth and light. Elena sat in the corner, with her back against the wall, her wounds poorly bandaged with scraps of cloth that the guards had thrown to her without comment. She had been here for hours now, alone with her thoughts and her pain. She did not regret what she had done. The cub had been so small, so frightened, and Elena could not have lived with herself if she had walked away. Yes, she had broken Valorian law, and yes, she might die for it, but at least she would die knowing she had done the right thing. There were some principles worth suffering for, and compassion was one of them. The door to her cell opened, and Commander Chen stepped inside with a medkit in his hands. Behind him, a Valorian guard watched with suspicious eyes, but made no move to stop him. "I talked them into letting me treat your wounds," Chen said as he knelt beside her. "The matriarch will be here tomorrow morning, and I did not want you facing her while half dead from infection." Elena smiled weakly as Chen began to clean and bandage her injuries. "Thank you, David. How bad is it out there?" Chen sighed heavily. "The Confederacy observers are in a panic. The Valorians are calling for blood, and half our team wants to smuggle you off planet before the trial. Elena, why did you do it? You know how fragile things are here." "I know," she admitted, "but I could not just leave her, David. She was a child, scared and alone and hurting. If I had walked away, what would that say about us? What would that say about humanity?" Chen finished wrapping her arm and sat back on his heels. "It would say that we know how to follow rules and stay alive." "No," Elena shook her head. "It would say that we are exactly what they think we are, weak and selfish and unable to see past our own survival. I did not come to the stars to prove them right, David. I came here to show them who we really are." Chen was quiet for a long moment, his eyes searching her face. "You really believe you did the right thing, do you not?" "I do." He stood and gathered his supplies, his expression troubled, but also touched with something that might have been respect. "Then I will do everything I can to make sure you get the chance to explain that to the matriarch. Get some rest, Elena. Tomorrow is going to be the hardest day of your life." He left, and the door closed behind him with a sound like a tomb sealing shut. Elena leaned her head back against the cold stone and closed her eyes. She thought about the cub's silver eyes and the moment when fear had turned to wonder. She thought about her grandmother's lullaby and how it had seemed to cross the vast gulf between species. And she thought about tomorrow, when she would stand before the most powerful leader on this world and try to explain something that the Valorians had never understood. The Great Hall of the Valorian Council was built to intimidate, and it succeeded beyond anything Elena had ever experienced. The ceiling rose so high that it disappeared into shadow, and massive pillars carved with images of ancient hunts lined the walls like stone guardians. Torches burned in brackets of black iron, casting dancing shadows across the faces of the hundreds of Valorians who had gathered to witness the trial. Elena stood in the center of the hall, alone. Her wounds had been properly treated thanks to Commander Chen, but she still felt weak and small in this place of giants. Every Valorian in the room towered over her, their eyes fixed on her with expressions ranging from curiosity to open hatred. She was the prey that had dared to touch their most sacred treasure, and they wanted to see her punished. At the far end of the hall, seated on a throne carved from a single massive bone, sat High Matriarch Cyreth. Elena had heard stories about the Valorian leader, but no story could have prepared her for the reality. Cyreth was enormous even by Valorian standards, her fur a deep gold that shimmered like liquid sunlight, her eyes burning with an intelligence that seemed to see through flesh and into the soul. She wore armor made from the scales of some great beast, and a crown of silver thorns rested on her head. This was a warrior queen, a ruler who had fought and killed for her position, and she looked at Elena like she was studying an insect. "Bring the human forward," Cyreth commanded, her voice echoing through the hall like rolling thunder. Guards pushed Elena from behind, and she stumbled forward, until she stood directly before the throne. She forced herself to stand straight and meet the matriarch's gaze, even though every instinct screamed at her to look away. "You are the one called Elena Vasquez?" Cyrith asked. "I am. And you are the one who touched my daughter without permission, who put your alien hands on a cub of the ruling bloodline?" "I am." A growl rippled through the assembled Valorians, but Cyrith raised one hand, and silence fell instantly. "You do not deny your actions?" "No, matriarch, I do not. Your daughter was hurt and frightened. Her leg was broken, and she was trapped. I did what any decent person would do. I helped her." Cyrith leaned forward on her throne, her golden eyes narrowing. "Any decent person? You speak as if your actions were normal, as if touching another species' young is something to be done without thought. Do you not understand our laws, human? Do you not understand that what you did is a crime punishable by death?" Elena took a deep breath. "I understand your laws, matriarch. I understand that you see my actions as a violation of something sacred. But I ask you to understand something in return." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "On my world we have a long and terrible history. For thousands of years, humans hurt each other. We fought wars over land and resources and ideas, and we killed millions of our own kind. We came very close to destroying ourselves completely." The Valorians shifted uncomfortably. They knew about human history, about the wars and the weapons and the destruction. It was one of the reasons they considered humans to be dangerous primitives. "But we survived," Elena continued. "And do you know how? Not through strength, not through conquest. We survived because we learned that compassion was more powerful than hatred. We learned that helping others, even strangers, even enemies, was the only way to build a future worth living in." She turned slowly, addressing the entire hall. "When I found your daughter in that forest, she attacked me. She cut my arm and my hand, and she would have kept attacking until I was dead if she could have. I had a weapon. I could have defended myself. By your own laws, I had the right to kill her to protect my own life." The hall was completely silent now, every eye fixed on the small human woman who dared to speak so boldly. "But I did not use my weapon. I put it away and I chose to help her instead. Not because I am weak, and not because I was unable to fight. I chose kindness because that is who I am. That is who humans are, at our best. We are the species that learn to turn enemies into friends, that learn to see children when others see threats." Cyrith's expression had not changed, but something in her eyes had shifted. "Pretty words," the matriarch said slowly, "but words do not change the law. You touched what was forbidden. The punishment is clear." "Then let me ask you something, matriarch." Elena stepped closer to the throne, ignoring the warning growls from the guards. "If your positions were reversed, if your daughter had found a human child trapped and injured, what would she have done? Would she have helped, or would she have walked away?" Cyrith was silent for a long moment. "She would have walked away," the matriarch finally admitted, "because that is what we teach our young. We teach them that other species are not their concern, that strength means caring only for our own." "And is that the kind of strength you want your daughter to have? The strength to ignore suffering? The strength to turn away from those who need help?" She shook her head. "On my world we have a saying, the measure of a civilization is how it treats its most vulnerable. By that measure, matriarch, which of us is truly strong?" The hall erupted in angry voices, Valorians shouting their outrage at the human who dared to question their ways. But Cyrith raised her hand again, and once more silence fell. "You are bold, human. I will give you that." The matriarch stood from their throne, her massive form rising like a mountain taking shape. "But boldness is not a defense against the law. You broke our sacred covenant. You touched what was forbidden." "I did what was right," Elena said simply, "and if you kill me for it, then my death will prove something to the galaxy." It will prove that the Valorians value tradition over compassion, that you would rather execute someone for saving a child than admit that your laws might be wrong. You think the galaxy cares about one human life? No, but they will care about what that life represents. Elena stood as tall as she could, her eyes never leaving Sireth's face. Every species in the Confederacy is watching this trial. They want to know what kind of people the Valorians really are. Kill me, and you tell them that you are exactly what they feared, a species that cannot see beyond its own pride. Spare me, and you tell them something else. You tell them that the Valorians can recognize goodness even when it comes from an unexpected source. Sireth stared down at Elena for what felt like an eternity. You ask me to change laws that have stood for 10,000 years. No, Elena shook her head. I ask you to see beyond them. Just this once. Just for one moment. Look at what actually happened in that forest. A child was hurt and afraid. A stranger chose to help her, knowing the cost. Is that really something that deserves death? The matriarch turned away, her expression unreadable. The council will consider your words, she said finally. You will be returned to your cell until a judgment is reached. But know this, human. She looked back over her shoulder, her golden eyes glowing in the torchlight. If I spare your life, it will not be because your pretty words moved me. It will be because I choose to see what kind of creature would bleed and suffer for a child that was not her own. The guards came forward to take Elena away. As she was led from the hall, she allowed herself to hope, just a little, that her words had found their mark. The council deliberated through the night, and Elena sat in her cell, listening to the distant sounds of arguing voices. She could not understand the words, but she could hear the anger and the confusion, the clash of ancient tradition against something new and strange. Her fate hung in the balance, and there was nothing she could do but wait. Sleep would not come, so she sat with her back against the cold wall and thought about home. She thought about the blue skies of Earth and the sound of rain on her childhood roof. She thought about her mother's smile and her father's laugh and all the small moments that had made her who she was. If this was to be her last night, she wanted to spend it remembering the good things. Morning came slowly, gray light seeping through the small window of her cell like reluctant hope. The guards came for her without speaking, their faces grim and unreadable, and they led her back through the winding corridors to the great hall. The crowd was even larger than before, packed so tightly that Elena could barely see the walls. Every Valorian on the planet seemed to have come to witness the judgment, and the air crackled with tension and anticipation. In the galleries above, Elena saw representatives from other Confederacy species watching with worried eyes, their diplomatic careers hanging on what happened next. High Matriarch Sireth sat on her throne, looking tired but determined. The night of debate had clearly taken its toll, and Elena wondered what arguments had been made for and against her life. She would probably never know. "Bring the human forward," Sireth commanded, her voice heavy with the weight of decision. Elena walked to the center of the hall and stood straight, refusing to show fear. Whatever happened next, she would face it with dignity. She owed that much to herself and to every human who would be judged by her example. Sireth rose from her throne and looked out over the assembled crowd. "We have deliberated through the night," she announced. "We have heard arguments from those who would see the human executed according to our ancient laws, and we have heard arguments from those who would show mercy. The decision has been difficult, because this case touches the very heart of who we are as a people." She paused, and the silence was so complete that Elena could hear her own heartbeat. The law is clear. Any outsider who touches a cub of the ruling bloodline must face death. This law has protected our children for 10,000 years, and it has served us well. To abandon it now would be to invite chaos and danger. The matriarch's words sounded like a death sentence being prepared. Therefore, the council has decided. Wait! A small voice cut through the silence like a knife, and every head in the hall turned toward the source. Elena felt her breath catch in her throat. The cub stood at the entrance to the great hall, her silver fur gleaming in the torchlight, and her injured leg still wrapped in the splint that Elena had made. She was so small compared to the adults around her, barely reaching their waists, but she stood with a determination that seemed to fill the entire room. "Kira!" Cyrus's voice was sharp with surprise. "You should not be here. This is not a place for children." "I am not a child," Kira said, limping forward through the crowd that parted before her like water. "I am the one who was hurt. I am the one who was saved. If you are going to decide this human's fate, then you must hear what I have to say." The matriarch hesitated, clearly torn between protocol and the fierce determination in her daughter's eyes. "Speak then," she finally said, "but be quick about it." Kira continued walking until she stood beside Elena in the center of the hall. She looked up at the human woman with those silver eyes that had once been filled with terror, and now they held something entirely different. "I was lost in the forest," Kira began, her young voice carrying clearly through the hall. "I was playing where I should not have been playing, and I fell into a tangle of roots. My leg broke, and I could not escape. I was there for hours, alone and frightened, and I thought I was going to die." She turned to address the crowd, her small body trembling, but her voice staying strong. "When the human found me, I attacked her. I cut her arm and her hand. I drew her blood, because that is what we are taught to do. We are taught that aliens are dangerous, that they will hurt us if given the chance. So I hurt her first." Kira looked back at Elena, and a tear rolled down her furry cheek. "But she did not hurt me back. She had a weapon. I saw it on her hip. She could have used it to kill me, to defend herself against the monster that was cutting her open. But she did not. She put the weapon away, and she came closer, and she started to speak to me in a voice that was soft and gentle, like the voice my nursemaid uses when I have bad dreams." The crowd was completely silent now, hanging on every word. She freed my leg from the roots, even though I scratched her again and again. She wrapped my broken bone in something that made the pain go away, even though her own blood was dripping onto the ground. And when it was done, when I was free and bandaged, she did not leave me alone in the dark. She stayed with me. She sang to me. Kira walked forward until she stood directly before her mother's throne. "I have been taught all my life that strength is everything, that the strong survive and the weak perish. But this human is not weak. She could have killed me, and she chose not to. She could have left me to suffer, and she chose to help. That is not weakness. That is something else, something I do not have a word for." She turned back to Elena and limped over to stand beside her. "In our tradition, when someone saves your life at great risk to their own, there is a bond that forms, a bond that cannot be broken." Kira reached up and took Elena's hand in her small, clawed paw. "This human has the soul of a Valorian mother. She protected me when she had no reason to. She suffered for me when she could have walked away. I will not stand here and watch her die for saving my life." Kira pressed her forehead against the back of Elena's hand, and a gasp went through the crowd. Elena did not understand the gesture, but she understood the weight of it. She could see shock on every Valorian face, could feel the shift in the air as something ancient and powerful passed between them. "The bond of eternal kinship," someone whispered. "She has given the bond." Cyrus stepped down from her throne, her massive form moving with slow deliberation. She walked across the hall until she stood before her daughter and the human who had saved her. "Kira," she said softly, "do you understand what you have done? The bond cannot be undone. You have tied your life to this alien's life. Her honor is your honor. Her shame is your shame. I understand, Kira said, not letting go of Elena's hand. And I would do it again. This human is worth it, Mother. She is worth more than all our laws and traditions. Can you not see it? Can you not see what she is? Cyrith looked at Elena for a long moment, her golden eyes searching, measuring, trying to understand the creature before her. What are you, human? She asked quietly. What kind of being bleeds and suffers for a child that is not her own? For a species that has shown her nothing but contempt? Elena felt tears rolling down her cheeks, but she did not wipe them away. I am just a person, she said. A person who believes that kindness matters more than survival. A person who thinks that helping others is what makes life worth living. I am nothing special, matriarch. On my world, there are billions like me. We are all just trying to take care of each other, one small act of compassion at a time. Cyrith was silent for a very long time. Then, slowly, she reached out and placed her massive hand over the joined hands of her daughter and the human. Perhaps, she said, we have something to learn from your kind, after all. The great hall had fallen into a silence so deep that Elena could hear the torches crackling in their brackets. Every eye was fixed on the matriarch, waiting to see what would happen next. The bond that Kira had given was ancient and sacred, and even Cyrith could not simply ignore it. The matriarch released their hands and stepped back, her expression unreadable. She turned to face the assembled crowd, her golden fur shimmering in the firelight. And when she spoke, her voice carried to every corner of the massive chamber. For 10,000 years, we Valorians have measured worth by the strength of one's claws and the sharpness of one's fangs. We have looked at other species and seen weakness. We have looked at humans and seen soft bodies, fragile skin, creatures that could not survive a single day in our forests without weapons and technology to protect them. She paused, and Elena could feel the tension in the room like a physical weight. We were fools. A murmur of shock rippled through the crowd, but Cyrith raised her hand and continued. True strength is not in the capacity to destroy. True strength is in the choice not to destroy when destruction would be easy. She gestured toward Elena. This human faced pain and terror from my daughter's claws. She was attacked, wounded, her blood spilled on the ground. She had every means to respond with violence. She had a weapon that could have ended my daughter's life in an instant. Cyrith's voice rose, filling the hall with its power. Instead, she responded with kindness. She chose to help rather than harm. And she did this, knowing that our laws condemned her for it, knowing that her compassion might cost her everything. The matriarch shook her head slowly. That is not weakness. That is a strength we do not possess, a strength we have never even imagined. She turned back to Elena and lowered her head in a gesture that drew gasps from every Valorian in the room. I recognize you, Cyrith said formally, her voice thick with emotion, not as a criminal, but as what you truly are. From this day forward, you shall be known among our people as Vethakir, Soul Guardian, the first non-Valorian in our history to bear that sacred title. Elena felt her knees go weak, and only Kira's small hand in hers kept her standing. I do not know what to say, she whispered. You do not need to say anything, Cyrith replied, raising her head. You have already said everything that matters, not with words, but with actions. My daughter understands something about the universe that I never taught her, something I never knew myself. For that, I can never repay you. The matriarch turned to address the crowd once more. Let it be known throughout Vethkara and beyond. The treaty between our people and the humans of Earth is no longer a cautious truce. From this day forward, it is a bond of kinship, forged in blood and sealed by kindness. Any who harm a human under our protection will answer to me personally. The hall erupted in sound, some voices raised in confusion, others in protest, but most, to Elena's amazement, raised in approval. She could see Valorians nodding to each other, their expressions thoughtful, rather than hostile. Something had shifted in this room, something that could never be shifted back. Commander Chen pushed through the crowd and rushed to Elena's side, his face showing a mix of relief and disbelief. "I cannot believe what just happened." "Neither can I," she admitted with a shaky laugh. "I thought I was going to die, David." "So did I." He looked at the matriarch with new respect. "What you did, what you said, it changed everything. The Confederacy observers are already sending reports back to their governments. This is going to reshape how every species in the galaxy sees humanity." Elena looked around the great hall, at the massive Valorians who had wanted her dead just hours ago, and who now looked at her with something approaching awe. She looked at little Kira, still holding her hand, smiling up at her with those silver eyes that had once been filled with fear. She looked at Cyrith, the warrior queen who had just bent 10,000 years of tradition, because one small human had refused to stop being kind. "I did not do this to change anything. I just wanted to help a little girl who was scared and alone." Shen replied, "I know. That is exactly why it worked." The ceremony that followed was long and complicated, filled with rituals that Elena did not understand, but participated in as best she could. She was given a medallion of rank that marked her as Vetha Kir, carved from the same kind of bone as the matriarch's throne. She was introduced to the council members who had argued for her life, and she thanked them with tears in her eyes. She was embraced by Valorian warriors who had to kneel down to hug her properly, their massive arms gentle despite their strength. And through it all, Kira stayed by her side, the small cub who had attacked her in fear, and now looked at her with something that could only be called love. When the ceremony finally ended, and Elena was allowed to return to the human section of the outpost, she found herself surrounded by her colleagues, all of them wanting to hear the story, all of them wanting to understand what had happened. "You could have died," one of them said, a young geologist named Marcus. "You knew the laws, you knew the punishment. How could you take that risk for an alien child you had never met?" Elena thought about the question for a long moment. "Because that is what being human means," she finally said. "We are not the strongest species in the galaxy. We are not the smartest or the fastest or the most technologically advanced. But we have something that matters more than any of that. We have the ability to see ourselves in others, to feel their pain as our own, to choose connection over conflict, even when it costs us everything." She looked out the window at the alien forest, glowing softly in the fading light. "My grandmother used to tell me that kindness was never wasted, even when it seemed to change nothing. She said that every act of compassion sends ripples out into the universe, touching lives in ways we can never predict." Elena smiled at the memory. "I thought she was just being sentimental. Now I understand that she was teaching me the most important lesson I would ever learn." 20 years later, when Ambassador Kira of Vethkara stood before the Galactic Confederacy Assembly, she was asked a question that she had been asked many times before. Why are humans so respected throughout the galaxy? They have no natural weapons, no extraordinary abilities. What makes them special? Kira smiled, her silver fur now streaked with the white of age, and she traced the old scar on her hind leg, where a human woman had once fashioned a splint to ease a frightened cub's pain. "Because when the galaxy expected them to fight, they chose to heal," she replied. "Because when they had every reason to hate, they chose to love. Because when a little girl attacked them in the dark, they chose kindness over revenge." She looked out at the assembled representatives of 100 different species, her voice carrying the weight of wisdom earned through a lifetime of experience. "That is why humanity will endure long after the conquerors are forgotten. That is why the stars themselves will remember their name. Not because they were the mightiest, but because they were the most gentle. Not because they dominated the galaxy, but because they taught the galaxy how to care. The assembly was silent for a moment, and then, one by one, the representatives began to stand, offering the gesture of respect that their species used to honor the truly great. And somewhere, in the endless reaches of space, the ripples of one woman's kindness continued to spread, touching lives in ways that no one could have predicted, changing the galaxy one small act of compassion at a time. That is the power of choosing kindness. That is the legacy of humanity among the stars.